This is James Kalm, the guy on the bike, welcoming you all back for another half-ass production. And we're coming to you today from the center of Williamsburg. We're actually going to pay a surprise studio visit to perhaps one of the most historically significant artists working in Williamsburg these days, famous Berlin artist Wolfgang Petrick. Stay tuned. Oh, that's a big dog. The year was 1973. The Vietnam War was raging. I was a 21-year-old GI stationed in Germany. While making a trip to Berlin, I dropped in at the Neue National Gallery. The exhibition was the Jahresausstellung des Deutsches Künstlerbundes. It was the first large-scale exhibition of contemporary artists I'd ever seen. I was overwhelmed, and at that time ignorant of the significance of many of these artists. While strolling the galleries, one picture in particular caught my attention. A disturbing portrait of a weazened old man with a Hitler mustache. The artist was Wolfgang Petrick. I bought the catalog, and over the years it became a kind of talisman, reminding me of the importance this show had had on my early ideas about art and artists. Soon after leaving the Army, I moved to New York to study on the GI Bill and became a practicing artist myself. While speaking to a young Williamsburg dealer, he mentioned that his next show was by the famous Berlin artist, Professor Wolfgang Petrick, who just happened to have a studio around the corner. Memories rushed back. I asked if I could get his phone number. I called and told him about seeing his painting in Berlin nearly 30 years before. And that's how I met Wolfgang Petrick.
It's Lauren. So you stop it.
Oh.
So
Well, this is Wolfgang Petrick. We're going to visit his studio today. Why don't you take us in and show us some of the stuff you're working on, please? You were talking about a new project that you were working on, doing a lot of drawings for a show that's coming up.
Yeah, well, there's some shows coming up, but there's one thing I really want to start with: a huge drawing. Not like the small ones, like usual. Just start on one corner and then it's moving all over the wall. And I have a structure like a space which was here around when they built all these kind of very nice living areas now with the marble bathrooms.
Right.
Put all the stuff into it, like collages, like drawings, like feather, like ink. So I hope it will become a huge piece, and I can frame it in a special way. So it's like a huge collage, but handmade. So
And this will be sort of documenting your time here in Williamsburg and the whole change of the neighborhood.
I
and
want to stick in the real thing which I was going through during that kind of
the
process,
transition,
but also with this kind of mythical thing and old stuff, and put all that in and try to make like a resume drawing up for the last years. You were feeling like being in a huge body somehow, and I tried to refigure that feeling with the drawing and with the collage, and not just with the painting. Just I did paintings too, but I think it's more special to do it very fine with the feather and all this kind of stuff.
Great.
So it's a project which takes time, because you can just work like you start there and finish in a month there. It has to grow like a huge garden or something like that.
We'll take some details of some of the pieces that you're working on now. I was kind of interested in maybe talking to you about some of the historical things you've been involved with. I was looking at the catalog for the Berlin Art, I think it was 1963 to 1985, that happened.
You mean,
was it at the Guggenheim? But they were sort of talking about critical realism as one of the chapters, and you were one of the founders of that.
Yeah, well, that was the time when I was who were working at that time. We had a kind of name. It was a long time after the war, but still, these were more or less abstract artists. And
well, I thought the thing that was interesting was the way that it was, in certain ways, it was kind of a reaction against a lot of abstraction. In certain ways,
just want to explain that
it was going.
The younger generation, well, they saw that and they liked it, and we were dealing with possibilities. But then every corner somehow came up with figurative stuff or kind of things, you know, real things. And the funny thing is, we started on a kind of psychological way, that's talking about me, and suddenly the figure became very important, and like starts to talk, and you try to discover. And then at the same time was a big movement in England and the United States, and pop art came out.
That's right.
So that was a kind of time feeling in a way about things and figuration and kind of not just the abstract way of.
But this was also one of the, what I would think of was one of the first kind of postmodernist movements, because you had actually sort of looked at total abstraction, all these things, but also looked back and was sort of inspired by the Neue Sachlichkeit.
And Dada, for example.
And Dada, right?
That parts of the Neue Sachlichkeit was also involved with Dada, like Otto Dix and all these guys. And
then sort of by
and you discovered suddenly the way of all this surrealism, which gave, in a way, a lot of possibilities to the abstract painters. So that was very unusual, because no one was talking about really in Germany. Speaking about Germany, I was not at that time not really aware of what's going on. Then I saw the pop art coming, the big shows. So that was a very influential way to find your own position and be very into that, to build up a world around you with figures, with things, with kind of psychological feelings and moods. And that became pretty successful, was huge shows even here from New York. We got letters, invitations, New School of Research, Glasgow, London. And it was a movement which London was called ugly realism. That was a big word suddenly somehow. And there was just a show here about ugly art. It was funny here in, I don't know which gallery.
I think that people are finally starting to catch up with some of the ideas that you and some of the other criticalists were working with.
Guys now dealing with these kind of figurative and kind of aggression.
Well, they're sort of mixing surrealism and pop and classical art and also some
personal way of
philosophical things and political things.
Yeah, so I think I talked with Jim Dine about it, because he said, well, at that time you were really into something which was a movement in the world. And like you said, maybe it was the first postmodern kind of impact somehow.
Okay, we're going to come back and stay tuned for part 2, folks. This is quite an interesting studio he's got here.
This is the end, beautiful.